Black Ops 6 may be one of Call of Duty's most controversial releases in the game's history, and not for a good reason. The game started out extremely hot and everyone seemed to be really happy with the game at launch, but now that people have had time to really sink their teeth into the game and get past the shiny new object honeymoon phase, everyone has started to see it for what it really is. If we look at Steam charts, we can see that the game is down 40% for the month of December, so something is definitely going on. Unfortunately, I saw the writing on the wall from the beta, and everyone got mad at me for being less than thrilled with the game. And the worst part about all of this was that I had major fears that this game was going to be a huge letdown ever since the rumor that Treyarch had been forced to switch to the Infinity Ward engine. But before we get into all of the issues with Black Ops 6, we have to go back to Modern Warfare 2019 and the launch of Warzone. Going from Black Ops 4, we went from a game that in some ways was a departure from what Call of Duty had been, true, but in a lot of ways it still had many of the core features that had become standard for Call of Duty games. Things like Pick 10, Dead Silence, player progression, earnable cosmetics, and a working minimap. However, with the introduction of Modern Warfare 2019, we literally lost all of the things that actually made the game fun, or at least made it feel like a Call of Duty game. And I'm sorry for those of you out there that try to cope so hard by saying things like, bro, that game saved the franchise, or that game brought me back to Call of Duty. I'm sorry, but it's not my fault that you're an idiot. If the reason that you came back to Call of Duty was because you saw Captain Price say, Bravo 6 going dark, and the Modern Warfare branding, you're part of the problem. But what does any of this have to do with Black Ops 6? Towards the end of Black Ops Cold War's lifecycle, leaks and rumors started popping up online that Treyarch was already beginning the development on their next title, rumored to be called Black Ops Gulf War. Now, initially, I was pretty happy to hear this until I saw one piece of information: that they were going to be forced to ditch their version of the Call of Duty engine, the engine that games like Black Ops 2, 3, 4, and Black Ops Cold War were built on, in favor of the new Infinity Ward engine. Now, if you guys are new to the channel, I'm a massive Infinity Ward hater. I've never liked a single one of Infinity Ward's games, and I'll even go as far as to say the original Modern Warfare 2 back in 2009 was actually a terrible game. If that game was released today, not only would people complain, but they would probably refund the game for how broken it was. But that's besides the point. So when I heard the rumor that Treyarch was moving to the Infinity Ward engine, my first thought was, they just killed the entire Black Ops series. Somehow, people still haven't figured out that all of the issues and complaints that they have with the last Call of Duty games almost all stem from either Modern Warfare 2019 or the Infinity Ward engine. So today, I'm going to go over the 8 fears I had for Black Ops 6 that ended up coming true. Number 1, we have to talk about doors. Why do we have doors in Black Ops 6? First of all, it goes completely against Treyarch's entire design philosophy when it comes to map design and game design. Every Treyarch game we've ever had was built around fast, fluid gameplay. All doors do is close down sightlines, encourage camping, and add randomness to the game that lowers the skill gap. For one, they're just flat out annoying to deal with and make playing around doorways awkward and inconsistent, with the doors flapping back and forth from people running into them and all the explosions. Sometimes you can peek a room or angle safely, but it totally depends on the direction the door is facing. It also makes the opening of the match worse because even if you have dead silence on, the sound of busting through doors lets enemies know exactly where you are. Now, you might be saying, but Caffrey, you can stop and open the door quietly. Yeah, that's exactly the problem, which goes back to my original point that it is completely against Treyarch's typical design philosophy. It slows the game down, adds tedious things to do, and if the doors just weren't there, I could move quickly to the point that I needed to get to. What makes doors even worse is that you can plant the bouncing betties, or I don't remember what they're called, spring mines maybe, or the blast traps behind the doors, and the only way to counter it is with the engineer perk. Now, sure, even if doors weren't there, you could drop those things in corners, but at least I have a chance to slice the room and clear it or check the common spots for them. But with doors, it makes the engineer perk almost a crutch unless you're playing Nuketown, because that's the only map in the game that doesn't have doors. Thank God. It also adds these little weird pockets for players to hide behind the doors once they're open, which again slows the game down because now you have to check another corner. My number 2 fear that came true in Black Ops 6 is mounting. There are games where mounting your weapon actually makes a lot of sense, but Call of Duty isn't one of them. Mounting has absolutely no business being in Call of Duty. The game is supposed to be an arcade shooter, so why are we putting tactical mechanics and tactical gameplay design in Black Ops 6 that encourage camping? Not to mention, it actually gives campers an advantage because they get to sit on a head glitch with reduced recoil. And again, this goes completely against the design of every other Treyarch game. This is going to be a recurring complaint in this video because we have every other Treyarch game to compare it to, and after 12-ish years of games that all play a certain way, it kind of sets expectations, especially after Black Ops Cold War was created in the worst development conditions I've ever heard of, and they still managed to pull out a great game that actually felt like a Treyarch title, which is what makes Black Ops 6 even more frustrating and more of a letdown. But mounting isn't the only stupid feature from Infinity Ward games that's ruining Black Ops 6, and that leads me to fear number 3, tactical sprint. This might actually be the most offensive of all the gameplay mechanics from Modern Warfare 2019, and this might be okay for Warzone, but for 6v6 Call of Duty, not only is it unnecessary, but it actually makes every aspect of the game worse. For starters, it slows down your sprint to fire and aim down side speeds. It also adds too many different movement states for your character. When I press the sprint button, I don't want 2 different types of sprint. I just want to sprint. Then combined with Omni movement, it just makes the overall movement feel clunky and awkward. And for anyone that thinks that somehow tactical sprint is a skill issue or that I need to get good or whatever, this is literally a 0 skill movement. I have 3,500 hours in Apex Legends on mouse and keyboard where there's actually movement that requires skill, so maybe keep quiet on this one. Just to show you how much smoother the game looks and feels without tac sprint, I went into a private lobby and actually disabled it in the settings, which, by the way, if it's that simple to just turn off, why did they leave it in the game? Now, I actually don't want to slow the pace of the game down. What I'd prefer to see is tac sprint removed and for them to just increase the base sprint speed a little bit. Look how much cleaner and fluid this game looks without tac sprint. Aiming, sprint to fire, omni movement all work so much better. Honestly, now that I'm kind of looking at the gameplay, I don't even think the base sprint speed needs to be increased, especially with how small these maps are. Just gut tac sprint entirely. Speaking of fluid gameplay, Black Ops 6 has been anything but that, which leads me to fear number 4 that I had for this game, packet burst. After watching it plague the game in Vanguard, Modern Warfare 22, and last year's game, Modern Warfare 23, I just knew it wasn't going to get fixed with this game. I'll be completely honest with you guys, I have no idea where to put the blame. It could be an engine issue, it could be a server side issue, it could be a Call of Duty running some crazy shit in the background that's taking up way too much bandwidth. I actually don't know. But what I do know is that Black Ops Cold War absolutely did not have this problem. Also, for some reason this year, on-demand texture streaming is no longer able to be disabled in-game, which makes no sense. Part of the reason that I play on PC is to have complete control over how my game looks. And last year with Modern Warfare 3, you could still disable it, but for some reason here in Black Ops 6, they've decided to remove that feature. I'd much rather just download like an HD texture pack and store it on my device, even if it takes up a bunch of space, just to disable on-demand texture streaming and have a more stable gameplay experience. The packet burst has gotten so bad, this game has been memed into being called Packet Burst 6. But that's not the only thing that's stopping this game from feeling fluid and fast. And that's fear number 5 that I had come true here in Packet Burst 6, poor performance. Somehow we have a collection of the smallest maps I've ever seen at launch, which you would think would be easy on your PC or console, right? And you'd also probably think that because this engine has been developed and optimized for over 5 years with constant updates and improvements, that the performance would be incredible, right? Wrong. Now, I have a 3080 in my PC, which isn't the best graphics card anymore, but it's a very solid GPU. I play all games at 1440p, and I always hit the max refresh rate on my monitor of 144 Hz. But somehow, in Packet Burst 6, even with a lot of graphics settings turned down to medium or low, I'm still barely getting the top of my frame rate limit. In many games, I can actually run settings on high or extreme and still max out my frame rate. And I'm not talking about old games, I'm talking about new, last year, up-to-date games. So again, going back to Black Ops Cold War, that game did have a rough first week or two, sure, but once they got everything polished out, that game ran flawlessly. Now, I know some of you are going to try and tell me that the graphics are way better on the new engine. Spoiler alert, they're not. And that the lighting, shadows, and effects are so much better. So, of course, it's going to be harder on your PC. Sure, fair enough. But if that's the case, why did I not have this many problems with last year's game? The performance wasn't great, but it wasn't this bad. This may seem like a small snobby complaint, but I'm not the only one. Tons of people are also having the same issues and making the same complaints. Nadeshot even made a video talking about how he brings in a former aerospace engineer to overclock his PC to brute force the game into running the frame rate he wants, squeezing every bit of performance out of his PC just to run the game the way it should. Let's take a listen.
I'm not even kidding. This guy used to work as an aerospace engineer, and he quit his fucking job to do 15 appointments a day from people in the Call of Duty community spending money to have him come in and optimize their PC, update their motherboards, tweak their GPUs and their CPUs, and literally push these PCs as far as they can, just so that they can get the amount of frames that you should be getting to play Call of Duty. I mean, they're doing fucking open heart surgery on my PC just to get 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 frames because the game is optimized like shit as well.
Now, is that a little overkill? Maybe. Is everyone doing this? Probably not. But it shouldn't be this difficult to get the game to run well, especially on an engine that's been updated for 5 years now. What's even worse is if I overclock my GPU at all, anything above the default settings, Black Ops 6 crashes. No idea why. I've tried it 5 different times. I can't get any overclock settings to work without the game freezing and then crashing. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I really hope they get this game polished up so it actually runs well and it's optimized. Now, let's imagine for a minute that all of the complaints that I just listed do get fixed. Tac sprint gets removed, mounting gets removed, the doors get removed, packet burst gets fixed, the servers run well, and the game gets optimized to run well. None of that matters if my next fear, which again came true, continues to be a problem. Number 6, a terrible anti-cheat. Ever since the switch to this new engine and the popularity of Warzone, somehow cheats have just continued to plague the game. Sometimes it's a little better, sometimes it's a lot worse. Sometimes you run into blatant cheaters, sometimes you're left wondering if someone is soft cheating. And that's one of the main reasons that I stopped playing Call of Duty for a while. I can handle running into blatant cheaters, but it's the fact that we know the game is full of hackers and that cheats are apparently really cheap and easy to come by. The game loses all of its integrity and it literally gaslights you into almost being schizophrenic because anytime you die in a weird way, you just sit there wondering if the person who just killed you is cheating. It will literally drive you insane. Eventually you just get fed up with it and stop playing because there's no trust, no integrity, and especially now that Call of Duty is fully supporting ranked modes, it just feels like, what's the point? If my reward for grinding to higher ranks is that I find more and more cheaters, then there's zero point in playing it at all. Now, this next problem I want to talk about has been fixed for the most part, but I just want to mention it here real quick because there's no reason that it should have ever been a problem in the game. Number 7, obnoxious visual recoil and weapon sway. How was this ever a feature in any game still blows my mind, let alone the fact that it's infected the last 3 Call of Duties. I've already said it a lot in this video, but I'm going to keep saying it. Black Ops Cold War did not have this issue. In fact, not a single Treyarch game has ever had this issue until Black Ops 6. Modern Warfare 2019 was the first game to dial up the visual recoil and smoke effects, but even that game by comparison wasn't that bad. And the reason that I bring this up is because for some reason games built on this Infinity Ward engine always tend to overdo the quote-unquote realism effects to the point where it actually affects the gameplay. How did anyone ever think it was a good idea to have weapon bobble and visual shake effects to the point where the back of your weapon is covering the front sight and you can't see your target? This isn't a military simulation, and none of these features, even at their maximum effect, don't really help with immersion or whatever they're supposed to do. They just make it annoying to play the game. You know what makes it feel even worse? Spawning into bullets and instantly dying, which is fear number 8. The horrible Infinity Ward spawn system that's been a problem in every single game since Modern Warfare 2019, with the exception of, you guessed it, Black Ops Cold War. I think we can all agree that the spawns in this game just don't make sense. The amount of times I spawn directly into someone's line of sight, or I watch an enemy spawn in front of me, is a lot. Now, I don't know for a fact what's actually going on under the hood, but from what I can gather online and my experience playing the game, it looks like the Infinity Ward engine uses some type of dynamic squad spawn system to place you near teammates that the system thinks are not in combat and are far enough away from the enemy. There also seems to be some type of revenge spawn system, or maybe the system is just bad, but I swear, if you kill an enemy multiple times, it feels like eventually that specific enemy just spawns behind you and they take you out. Please let me know in the comments, am I crazy or does anyone else have the same experience? But that's not even the worst part about the spawn system. Now, typically, I like when spawns have a little stickiness to them in the sense that even if you push up a little bit into the enemy territory, the spawn doesn't immediately flip unless your entire team is there and over pushing. But in Black Ops 6, it feels like the enemy can just jump in your spawn, kill you over and over and over again, and they never ever flip. And this kind of turns every match into a race to see who can spawn trap and get their streaks the fastest. Now, that's always kind of been the thing, but it's never been this bad. Since this entire video is basically comparing Black Ops Cold War to Black Ops 6, and if you can't tell, I'm basically saying that all of these problems stem from the Infinity Ward engine, I just want to give a brief overview of how spawns worked in the past. Previously, we had a much more static spawn system where there would be predefined spawn points, and based on whichever area the game deemed safe, you would spawn there. Let's use Nuketown for this example because it's the easiest. Nuketown spawns were very simple. We had primary, secondary, and relief spawns for when those first two areas weren't safe. Typically, you would spawn in the relief areas when the enemy was all over the map, kind of in both sides of the spawn. The game used to be a fight for map control, where you would try and gain control over the enemy side and the middle area to keep your enemies in front of you. And if you pushed too far into the enemy spawn, it would flip them and they would start spawning behind you, and you would lose map control. But now in Black Ops 6, you can push all the way into their spawn and not really see any flip or spawning enemies to the relief spawns. My next complaint / fear isn't necessarily an engine specific issue, but it's a trend that I've noticed ever since 2019, and the only reason Black Ops Cold War was different was because the game was already under development, and every other game since then clearly had to fall in line. Fear number 9, a fast time to kill. And before anyone comes for me in the comments section, just hear me out. Remember, a lot of people liked Black Ops Cold War, and it had the second longest time to kill in the franchise. This comes with a few main benefits. First, it allows the developers to balance weapons much better because a longer time to kill gives them more room to differentiate all the different weapons. And they also have a little bit more headroom to tweak things like damage, fire rate, damage drop-off, recoil, all those things. Second, it allows for you to actually have gunfights where you have to hit your shots over a longer period of time instead of just whoever sees the person first. This gives players that prefer to stay on the move a chance at outplaying campers that hide in corners or just sit on one piece of cover pre-aiming. Now, obviously, if you're pre-aiming or camping, you should have an advantage, but it shouldn't just guarantee you the kill, especially if you can't hit 5 or 6 shots. And with how bad Call of Duty servers have felt over the last few years, a fast time to kill feels like you're basically playing hardcore, where you just die in what feels like one shot, only to watch the kill cam and see that person unloading half a mag. And that brings me to fear number 10, which isn't something I had predicted, but it's more of a complaint at this point. I'm not sure if it's an engine specific issue or not, but I don't like it, and I'm gonna say it. Have you guys ever been playing the game and then all of a sudden a teammate runs next to you and just shoves you out of the way or off the map even? The player collision might be one of the most frustrating things in this game that I've had to deal with, especially while grinding the snipers. I can't tell you how many times I had shots lined up only to get shouldered out of the way by a teammate. If you play face-off at all, I know you know what I'm talking about. If you're running in the same direction as your teammates, I swear it feels like you're playing bumper car first-person shooter. I haven't seen that many people mention it, so maybe it's just a me issue, but I remember this being an issue in other games and it got fixed, so I'm hoping to see the same thing happen here in Black Ops 6. The core issue I have with Black Ops 6 is that, while thematically it's a sequel to Black Ops Cold War, the multiplayer doesn't in any way feel like a Treyarch game to me. It feels like an Infinity Ward game with a Treyarch coat of paint. And that's what happens when you force every studio to use the same engine. If you thought Call of Duty was the same game every year with a fresh coat of paint, this new era of Call of Duty, it's even worse. If you like that video and you want to watch another one, click here.